The rain tapped a rhythmic pattern against the windows, a gentle but persistent percussion that filled the room. The glass was cold beneath my fingertips as I stood there, my breath fogging the surface. Beyond the misted pane was a world softened by the rain, the glow of streetlights pooling in small golden lakes on the pavement. My gaze was drawn, almost involuntarily, to the window across from mine, where the lights inside cast a warm, inviting glow against the backdrop of the storm. She was there again, silhouetted against the soft light of her living room. Her name was Claire, my neighbor, a woman whose presence I had grown accustomed to observing from a distance. She turned slightly, and for a moment, the illusion of privacy dissolved. Our eyes met. I froze, caught in the act of looking, of being seen. But instead of retreating, she approached, her steps deliberate, her gaze unwavering. She came closer until her palms pressed against the glass, her face just inches from mine. "Then don't look away," she said, her voice barely audible through the rain and the glass that separated us. Her words were a challenge, a dare that hung in the air between us, charged and electric. "My name is Daniel Carter. I'm 34, an architect by trade, though my current projects lean more toward solitary sketches than actual builds. Life had taken on a predictable rhythm, a metronome of work and quiet evenings spent in the company of my own thoughts. Emotional detachment had become my comfort zone, a fortress of solitude that, until now, had seemed impenetrable. But Claire, with her enigmatic presence and the subtle allure of her gaze, had disrupted that solitude. She was 32, a freelance photographer whose work often took her far from the confines of this suburban neighborhood. There was always an air of mystery about her, a quiet intensity that seemed to envelop her like a cloak. She was both distant and present, a contradiction that drew me in despite my better judgment. The rain continued to fall, a soft curtain that blurred the world outside. I remained at the window, my heart a staccato beat in my chest, as her words echoed in my mind. "Don't look away." It was an invitation, a permission granted that made everything harder to unsee, harder to ignore. Days passed, yet the memory of that night lingered, a persistent whisper at the edge of my consciousness. I would catch glimpses of her in passing, a flash of auburn hair as she walked to her car, the curve of her smile when she greeted the mailman. Each encounter was a reminder of the line I had crossed, of the unspoken understanding that now existed between us. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the sky turned a deep indigo, I found myself drawn once more to that familiar window. The lamp inside cast a warm, golden glow, and there she was, seated on the couch, a book in her lap. Her presence was magnetic, a force that pulled me from my solitude toward the promise of something more. The sound of a door closing broke the spell, and I turned just in time to see her step outside, her figure backlit by the porch light. She paused, her gaze sweeping the street before settling on me. For a moment I considered retreating, allowing the night to swallow me whole. But then she smiled, a soft curve of her lips that spoke of understanding and perhaps something more. "Daniel," she called, her voice carrying easily across the space between us. "Come over." The words were simple, yet they held a weight that belied their casual delivery. I hesitated, my mind a cacophony of rational thoughts and irrational desires. But the pull of her invitation was stronger than the chains of my caution. I crossed the street, the cool night air a balm against my flushed skin. Her house was warm, a cocoon of comfort that contrasted sharply with the storm that still raged outside. She led me to the kitchen, where the scent of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the faint aroma of vanilla. We sat across from each other, the table a physical barrier that felt both necessary and intrusive. "Why did you invite me?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Claire took a sip of her coffee, her eyes never leaving mine. "Because I wanted to see if you'd come," she replied, her tone matter-of-fact, yet layered with unspoken meaning. Silence settled between us, heavy with the weight of things unsaid. I studied her, noting the way the soft light played across her features, the subtle tension in her shoulders that spoke of vulnerability. She was a puzzle, each piece a tantalizing mystery that begged to be solved. "Do you always watch people through your window?" she asked, the corner of her mouth quirking up in a teasing smile. I shrugged, trying to play off the embarrassment that threatened to color my cheeks. "Only when they're interesting enough to watch." Her laughter was soft, a musical sound that broke the tension and filled the space between us. "I suppose I should be flattered, then." The conversation flowed, each word a step closer to something neither of us dared to define. We spoke of mundane things, work, the weather, the quirks of our neighborhood. Yet beneath the surface, there was an undercurrent of something more, a connection that defied explanation. As the evening wore on, the boundaries between us blurred, the lines of our separate lives beginning to entwine in ways that felt both exhilarating and terrifying. I found myself drawn to her, not just by the allure of her presence, but by the promise of understanding that lay within her gaze. But with that closeness came fear, a creeping dread that whispered of consequences and the fragility of what we were building. I was acutely aware of the risk, of the precarious balance we walked between friendship and something deeper. One night, as the rain fell in sheets outside, I found myself once again at her window, watching as she moved about her living room, tidying up the remnants of a day well spent. She glanced up, her eyes meeting mine with a familiarity that had become both comforting and unsettling. "Come in," she mouthed, her lips forming the words with an ease that belied the turmoil within me. I hesitated, the weight of our unspoken understanding pressing down on me. But the pull of her invitation was irresistible, and I found myself crossing the street once more, the rain a cold kiss against my skin. Inside, the warmth of her home enveloped me, and I felt the tension ease from my shoulders. She was waiting, a steaming mug in hand, her expression open and inviting. "Are you always this hospitable?" I asked, accepting the mug with a grateful nod. "Only to neighbors who are too shy to knock on the door," she replied, her eyes twinkling with mischief. We settled into a comfortable silence, the only sound the patter of rain against the roof. It was a moment of peace, a fragile truce that held the promise of something more. But as the night wore on, the reality of our situation loomed large, a specter that threatened to unravel the delicate threads we had woven. The knowledge that our connection, however profound, was built on a foundation of uncertainty weighed heavily on my mind. "Claire," I began, the words heavy on my tongue. "What are we doing?" She met my gaze, her expression thoughtful. "I don't know," she admitted, her voice soft, "but I want to find out." Her honesty was a balm, soothing the frayed edges of my fear. But with it came the realization that what we were building was fragile, a house of cards that could collapse at any moment. In the days that followed, the boundaries between us continued to shift, our connection deepening even as the specter of uncertainty loomed ever larger. We spent time together, exploring the uncharted territory of our relationship, each moment a step closer to understanding. Yet beneath the surface, fear lingered, a constant undercurrent that threatened to pull us under. The risk of losing everything, the comfort of solitude, the security of detachment, loomed large, a shadow that cast its pall over our growing bond. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the world was bathed in the soft glow of twilight, I found myself once more at her side. We sat on her porch, the night air cool and crisp, our hands grazing as we spoke of nothing and everything. "Do you ever think about the future?" she asked, her gaze fixed on the stars that dotted the sky. "Sometimes," I replied, the words feeling inadequate in the face of her question. She turned to me, her eyes searching. "And what do you see?" It was a question laden with possibility, with the promise of something more. But with that promise came fear, the knowledge that the future was uncertain, that the path we walked was fraught with risk. "I see us," I said, the words slipping out before I could second-guess them. "But I don't know where we end up." It was the truth, raw and unvarnished, and it hung between us, a fragile thread that bound us together even as it threatened to unravel. Claire's hand found mine, her fingers intertwining with mine in a gesture of quiet solidarity. "Maybe that's enough," she said, her voice a whisper that carried the weight of hope. In that moment, I realized that the journey we were on, however uncertain, was worth the risk. That the connection we shared, though fragile, was a beacon in the darkness, a light that guided us through the storm. The rain continued to fall, a gentle lullaby that soothed the fears that lingered at the edge of my consciousness. And as we sat there, hands entwined, I knew that whatever the future held, we would face it together. In the quiet of that rainy evening, with the world softened by the storm and the promise of something more lingering in the air, our new reality took shape. It was a fragile thing, built on the foundation of an unspoken understanding and the hope of what could be. And while the path ahead was uncertain, the bond we had forged was strong, a testament to the power of connection and the resilience of the human spirit. As the rain continued to fall, I found solace in the knowledge that our journey, however fraught with risk, was worth every step. And as the night gave way to morning, the first light of dawn breaking over the horizon, I knew that the future, though unwritten, held the promise of hope.